People think being smart is all you need to succeed, that gifted kids will grow up just fine, maybe even change the world. But it's not always what happens. Some of the brightest people I know struggle the most with friendships, self-worth, and burnout. In this episode, we're talking about what happens after the praise and what it really takes to see the whole person, not just their intelligence. Hi, I'm Dr. Theresa Haskins, and welcome to Think Differently, the podcast that challenges the status quo and explores the power of neurodiversity to create a more inclusive and accessible world. Together, we will talk about everything from the value of different perspectives to the limitless potential of human beings. We'll explore how embracing differences can lead to endless possibilities and how you can maximize strengths to make a positive impact on the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as we get ready to think differently. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest episode. Today, we're going to discuss the concept of brilliance, giftedness, intelligence. Many of us grew up believing that if you were smart, that would be the ticket. Good grades, top of your class. You'd hear people say things like, "He's the smart one in the family. That kid's a genius. He's going to make it anywhere." But what if being smart isn't the whole story? What if intelligence, being really, really smart, doesn't actually protect you from struggle? What if it actually compounds it? What if it makes it harder for people to accept you for who you are? When we think of gifted people or geniuses, we tend to put them up on a pedestal. We think brilliance equals ease, Einstein, Tesla, natural paths to success. We associate giftedness with promise and potential. There's this narrative that someone who's so smart should have things come easily, and therefore success will always follow. These are usually the kids who are years ahead of their peers early on in school. They seem to just absorb information. And so often, these are the people that don't really work that hard to learn, at least not in the beginning. Basic math comes, they read early, a narrative starts to form that all they have to do is show up and they'll be successful. But life is never that simple. And talent distribution isn't always even. It can get really narrow, especially as we get older. So maybe you find you're academically gifted, but over time, you'll realize that maybe you're not so proficient at sports, like throwing a ball. Or maybe you don't have the kinesthetic skills to do fine motor work. And that's when people start wondering, am I really as smart as they said I was? Even when the answer is still yes. If you or someone you know were labeled as gifted, or if you have a gifted child, one of the first things you need to know is that giftedness is not just intelligence. It can show up in many domains. We often attribute genius to high IQ, but there are multiple forms of high intelligence in the arts and sports. But for now, we're going to stay in the educational context. One of the things we need to appreciate first is genius is another form of neurodivergence. Most people's brains aren't wired to store and process data as quickly or as deeply as gifted individuals. And when you're someone for whom life has always come easily, what happens when you begin to engage in the world differently, socially, emotionally, or in subjects that are not your strength? Because of early wins and a strong capacity to learn, these people often haven't built any tenacity to overcome adversity and challenges. Many end up in what we call cruise control learning. That's a real thing. And learning to study with very little effort creates a shock when they finally hit material that challenges them and requires effort. And when these smart people finally hit a wall, there's very little empathy for them. People will say dismissive things like, "You're smart, you'll figure it out." And those comments start to erode the person's sense of self and identity. And an internal narrative begins. If I was so smart, everything should be easy. So maybe I'm not as great as I thought. And that is a dangerous pathway of thinking that is all too common amongst gifted people. The truth is that giftedness doesn't shield you from anxiety. It doesn't shield you from emotional pain. It doesn't erase executive functioning struggles or organizational issues. Being gifted in one area doesn't mean you'll be gifted in all areas. It doesn't mean you'll be socially intuitive. And it certainly doesn't guarantee you'll receive support you need. In fact, it might guarantee the opposite. If people think you're smart, they assume you don't need help because usually you're the helper. You're the one who gets straight A's, who seems to never struggle. So when you do fail, or even just falter, you fall harder because you weren't supposed to fall at all, or so you've been told, because you're too smart to fail. So when that happens to a young person, or a teen, or an adult, what happens when they can't figure it out? They struggle more. Some will overcome the hurdle. Some will get depressed. Some will just opt out and quit. I've lived this. My family has lived this. I've worked with many families who have said things like, he's brilliant in school, but falling apart emotionally. She can write a college essay in minutes, but melts down if plans change. He understands physics, but forgets to brush his teeth. That's not a contradiction. That's twice exceptionality. And it's not as extremely rare as it sounds. Approximately 2 to 5% of the world population is twice exceptional. It's just rarely understood. And research backs this. Twice exceptional individuals, people who are both gifted and have some sort of disability, often show exceptional strengths in a few domains and significant struggles in others. Albert Einstein couldn't count spare change and had trouble tying his shoes. But we also know he came up with the theory of relativity. Studies show twice exceptional students often experience academic success that's inconsistent with their social and emotional development. Executive functioning, emotional regulation, and the social pragmatics can all lag far behind their peers. And if you think about the nutty professor trope, this makes sense. The genius teacher whose office looks like a bomb went off, crazy hair, their brains are dialed into something extraordinary, but everything else is forgotten about and left behind. So these are the students that can ace calculus, but will forget their backpack. They can write award-winning essays, but they miss the deadline. It's not laziness, it's neurological. For those with average or maybe above average intelligence, social and organizational skills are often more balanced. That's why most workplaces and communities run the way they do. This is where the normative talents are most aligned. At the extremes, we see a different neurological profile. And none of this is bad, but it does explain why people struggle to understand if you're so smart. How can you not X, Y, Z, fill in the blank, cross the street, pay a bill, show up on time? And it's because everyday skills most people take for granted are the ones that gifted individuals may lack because their brains developed differently. Different parts of the brain are lighting up differently than the normative way the brain works. And that's why genius is a form of neurodivergence, because how they engage with the world diverges from the norm. For a while, scaffolding will help. This is what we see in early childhood. Teachers, parents, routines, they keep gifted kids on track. But as you get older, that type of scaffolding and support disappears. And this is when the cracks begin to show. Maybe it's in high school or college. Maybe it's the first job, but it's going to show. There's also a deep loneliness in being the smart one that many people don't talk about. People expect you to have all the answers, to help everyone, to keep it together, and to meet the standard or exceed expectations every time. And when you don't do that, it feels like a betrayal of others' expectations and of your own identity. Being smart isn't the same as having life skills. Being smart doesn't teach you self-regulation. It doesn't teach you how to ask for help. And it doesn't teach you how to live in a world that wasn't built with your wiring in mind. When you've always been told you're amazing and brilliant and gifted, what happens the first time you struggle? Self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and it hits fast. Carol Dweck's research on fixed and growth mindset shows that when children are praised for being smart rather than for being recognized for their effort, they internalize an achievement as their identity. And when achievement falters, their sense of worth collapses. If a person begins to fear failure, they will often opt out and not even try. Not because they're lazy, but because trying and failing is more terrifying than not trying at all. That's not resilience. That's perfectionism in disguise. And then when burnout comes, they don't just lose momentum, they lose themselves. Society at large assumes that giftedness is some golden ticket, that if you're smart, you're set. But intelligence without support is just another kind of vulnerability. Some of the most successful entrepreneurs and leaders weren't top students. Some are school dropouts. They succeeded not through IQ alone, but because of grit and resilience. We need to know this because gifted kids get bored fast, and they often opt out rather than push through. Intelligence needs support systems, coping tools, not just praise. They need to build grit and resilience too. But because in our culture, intelligence is currency, it's envied and admired. And this is also isolating. A recent study on gifted college students from the Journal of Education of the Gifted found that many experience heightened imposter syndrome. And it's not because these students aren't smart. It's because they're smart. Because of the higher expectations they have on themselves, they had greater doubt that they could maintain it in that environment. So when anxiety and sensory overload meet perfectionism, we know burnout isn't far behind. And that's when we see gifted students drop out, give up, or fall apart. What we need to take from this isn't that we can't set up gifted students for success because they have the intelligence and the talent. But what we need to appreciate is you can be brilliant and still need support. And you can be exceptional and still struggle. And you can be a genius and still feel lost sometimes. And that doesn't make the person broken. That makes them human. The other thing that we forget is that humans want to belong. And studies on social belonging show that gifted students are more likely to desire friends but not have them, especially when peer-level interaction and differentiated instruction are missing in the environment. It's this paradox of giftedness. You're admired for your mind, but excluded from the group. People want you to help them with their homework, but they don't want to sit with you at lunch. And it seems the more you achieve, the further you drift from your peers. And while your brain may be primed for acceleration, it doesn't fulfill the most basic human desire: connection. So if you're raising a gifted child, or if you were one, we need to help create pathways and support integration, appreciation, and social connection, seeing the whole person and not just the gifts. We need to stop using smart as a shield to ignore someone's needs or some easy ability to overcome them. Because giftedness isn't a promise. It's just a pattern of difference. It's a way of seeing the world that diverges from the norm, and that difference deserves care, not pedestals, not pressure, or dismissal. So let's stop confusing giftedness with ease. Let's stop praising brilliance while ignoring the person behind it. Because everyone deserves to be seen. We all want to belong. We all need support. Every single one of us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Think Differently. I hope you found our discussion today insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank Audio Work Studios for their exceptional production and recording support. Without their expertise and dedication, this podcast would not be possible. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Your support helps us to reach new audiences and promote neurodiversity in our world. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Think Differently.